All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for rating and reviewing. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. We're happy to have back today Katie Herzog. She's the co-host of the Blocked and Reported podcast. Katie Herzog, welcome back to the news.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me again.
Always great to talk with you. I want to start with this story. I don't know if you saw this. I'm guessing you have. Bill
Are you saying I spend too much time online? I think that's what you're saying. I do.
You do.
It's true.
Bill Maher. By the way, when did Bill Maher become one of the most important conservative voices in America? When did this happen?
Sometime between 9/11 and 2020, I suppose. I think it was when he had Barry Weiss on his show for the first time.
That might be what it is. And by the way, you've become this amazing fill-in newsletter writer. The last time you were on, you had just written this much ballyhooed newsletter for Andrew Sullivan Substack, and now you just did one for Barry. How do you get on the Substack fill-in circuit? How does that work?
When people need to go on vacation, they know I'm not busy. Yeah, I don't work that much. That's sort of my plan, is to work as little as possible. But both Barry and Andrew are people who are able to convince me to do things that I don't necessarily want to do. So when they ask me to write for them, I will do it.
So anyway, Bill Maher was telling, is it Lin Manuel or Manuel?
Manuel.
Lin Manuel-Miranda, who, by the way, I mean, arguably the most important artist of the 21st century, I would say.
Well, when it comes to musical theater, for sure. Definitely.
But I mean, it just both in terms of its cultural impact, and I think also being a positive force for good. But I guess he has this other play called In the Heights, and there isn't not enough diversity. And Manuel Miranda, I believe, apologized for this, which is insane.
Yeah. So the cast it's a show about Latinos, or Latinxes, I suppose, if you want to use the current NPR parlance. And I haven't seen it. It's musical theater, but it's on TV. It's now a television production or a movie. And after it came out, he got yelled at by a bunch of people for there weren't enough Afro Latinos in the show. And so he apologized for this, and Bill Maher scolded him for apologizing.
Yeah, and he's like, look, you made Thomas Jefferson black. You don't have to apologize. You've got nothing to apologize for.
Yeah. And, he probably has a PR team advising him. All of these people have PR teams and communications experts, quote unquote experts, who will tell you to apologize and how to apologize. I don't think apologizing is a good idea. Apologizing, especially if you haven't actually done anything wrong, which I think and this is one of those cases where he didn't actually do anything wrong. And so apologizing will not assuage your critics at all. And it will make the people who might support you not support you. It's just it doesn't work unless you really genuinely feel like you have done something wrong. If you have done something egregiously wrong, of course you should apologize. But if you haven't, it doesn't help.
The larger problem with apologizing, and look, I'm not convinced that I think it actually may work as a PR strategy for the individual, but I think there's the larger problem. It's sort of like paying ransom, when the Russians hijack your pipeline and you pay them millions of dollars, that incentivizes, more terrorism or whatever we want to call it. Right. And so when Lin Manuel, when he is brought to heel and he apologizes, man, that just causes the sharks to start circling. And someone like me, I'm going to be like, hey, if Lin Manuel couldn't stand up to the mob, how can I? How am I going to muster the courage to stand up to them?
Well, he has more to lose than you do.
That is true. He does have more to lose, but but he also has, he does have more to lose, but he also has more credibility. I mean, if anybody could stand up to him and say fuck you, I'm not backing down, it would be him.
And that would actually work. I think it would work. I mean, there's a certain contingent of people who would write him off forever, but he would also gain a lot of fans who are tired of what's happening, who are tired of this bullshit. So I would like to see more people refusing to apologize when they haven't done anything wrong, but it's not the advice I think most communications professionals would give.
I know. It's so sad though, because I think that, say winning is contagious and so is losing. I think courage is contagious. And I could just say, like, when I've seen people who have bowed to Trump, it is so demoralizing because it makes other people think, I guess I have to do it. How am I going to stand up if this guy won't? And like when someone like, Lin Manuel-Miranda, by the way, why can't his name be Bob? It'd be like a lot easier, but if he can't stand up to the mob.
Matt, that's your white supremacy talking.
I think it must be.
Yeah.
And I coached Little League this year, and there's not a single Bob. There's no Bob. There's no Frank. There's no
kids have names like Eagle and Diamond and Fox. Kids don't have normal names anymore.
It's a problem. I thought when I called my kids Burke and Beckett that I was like breaking new. I thought it was like going to be the River Phoenix of like West Virginia, and it turns out, nobody has that. I want to ask you. You've been writing about Yashir Ali. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yashir. I haven't written anything about it. I've tweeted about it, and we talked about it briefly on one of the Patreon episodes of my podcast. But yes, Yashir.
Let me just set it up, and then you could tell me where I'm wrong. So this is a dude who, he like ostensibly writes for HuffPost, but mainly he is really powerful as a tweeter. He's got, I'm guessing, millions of followers, or certainly hundreds of thousands of followers. And he's like a real tastemaker, and causes that he champions. He can like raise money for philanthropic things. But there was it LA
Magazine? Weekly? I think it was LA Magazine.
LA Magazine did a profile of him, and it struck me. I think the way that they made him look was that he is using this platform in ways that would be seen as maybe like unethical journalistically to defend people who are possibly patrons of his and to attack their enemies. But What was your read?
That's basically it. He's a mysterious guy. And like he somehow insinuates himself into the lives of celebrities to the point where he lived with Kathy Griffin for like 9 months before she kicked him out. There are lots of rumors, like one of the rumors circulating about him was that he came from a wealthy Iranian family. That doesn't seem to check out. He seems to be sort of like come from like middle class Chicago Iranian immigrants. But he just sort of appeared out of nowhere and amassed hundreds of thousands of followers and does have this real power on Twitter. And he sometimes uses his power for good. Like he's very into elephants and he does good works with like elephant conservation and preservation. But he also, if he doesn't like someone or someone has been mean to one of his friends, he will ruin that person's life. So I think the most salient example is Alison Roman, who was a very, very popular food writer and cook at the New York Times. She had a column at the Times. And she gave an interview last year in some like obscure design newsletter where she said something sort of catty about Chrissy Teigen and Marie Kondo. It basically said that they were like, by having product lines, they were sellouts. And Yashir found this. I'm sure somebody sent it to him. And he accused her of racism because she criticized these two very powerful women who happened to not be white. And this actually ruined her career. She got let go by the Times. She was publicly shamed. She now does like a YouTube show, cooking show or something like that. She's doing fine, but I don't actually know.
Did she apologize?
She apologized. And he also found some photos of her from at least 10 years ago where she was dressed with what he described as, he said that she was dressed like a chola for Halloween. So a sort of stereotypical Hispanic woman of a certain, a stereotype. She says, and convincingly says, she was dressed like Amy Winehouse. So wearing like a wife beater and hoop earrings. And Yasher blew this up, and this was used as like additional ammunition against her. So in this LA Magazine profile, it turns out that Yasha has a bunch of skeletons in his own closet. And he has sort of disappeared since the profile came out. So this was over a week ago, and he hasn't tweeted. He was, in the run up to the piece, he was tweeting a lot about how he was suicidal. So I hope he's okay. I'm not sure. The timing did seem sort of odd that he knew that this piece was coming out. And then he's also tweeting about how he's suicidal. Maybe that was genuine. Maybe it was an attempt to deflect or to create sympathy for himself. I don't know. He comes across to me as like a rather amoral person, except when it comes to elephants. But he has sort of disappeared. So I tweeted, somebody should check Chrissy Teigen's basement, because she has also, his friend Chrissy Teigen has also been through the ringer this week for her own previous social media sins. So maybe they're holed up together somewhere.
And I did see that people were like saying that he may not be, that his like Twitter avatar may not be like accurate, or that like it's like an old picture.
I mean, I have to say, like, I have the headshots that I send to people are 10 years old, because I only have headshots that are 10 years old. So I sort of have some sympathy for that. But he does not look like his avatar. Also, my Twitter avatar is me in a scuba suit, so I don't really look like my avatar either.
Also, you and I are videotaping this now. So if you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher, you could go to my YouTube page and see us. People could see what we look like. I was on Morning Joe a couple days ago. People know what I look like. And if my Twitter avatar does not match, like if I'm making myself look overly glamorous, you will know that. But I guess in his case, people really don't know what he looks like.
Well, the picture that he uses in his avatar looks like he's about 100 pounds lighter than he currently is. Yes. You know, how big a sin is that? I'd say that's what's the word for the minor sin? I'm not. This is
what are the
venal is one. I don't remember the others.
No, I was trying to use like the microaggression. This is like a micro infraction.
A micro infraction, yes. Using a hotter picture than yourself. I think it would be a bigger deal on like a dating profile, a dating app, so that somebody goes expecting the svelte Yasher and they get the bloated Yasher. But
he says he's 6'4". Here's the thing, that doesn't work out. I mean, I've never done online dating because it didn't exist. You know, actually, when I was single, if you were dating online, you were a loser.
It's weird. Oh,
you were like a weird, and if you got married to someone you met online, you'd be like, no, I met her at a whorehouse. I picked her up at a bar.
Found her
this wasn't the internet.
Center. Anything but online. Yeah. Those days have changed. I met my wife on Tinder. It's very, it's very accepted, very common now, I think. I'm sure it's still weird for older generations, but the good thing, I will say, like, the good thing about apps is that you meet people who you never would meet, because you don't, when you meet people in real life, like, you go to the same places, you have common connections. That sort of limits your ability to meet people outside of your social network. And the good thing about meeting people online is that you can meet people from who you would never cross paths with in real life. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but in my case, it worked out.
I see the benefit. I see the benefit of it. I guess my point would be, if you were going to lie on your profile, you wouldn't want to lie too much, because they're going to meet you. Right. It's not like,
ideally.
Yeah.
Unless you're like married and this is just for kicks and you're never actually planning on meeting somebody and you're just.
I'm seeing some cool tattoos. What are these?
Oh, they're not cool. They're extremely embarrassing. They're embarrassing. I don't want to disclose. They're too embarrassing.
Just can you show? Just do that again.
I'll just show you. Okay, this one. Yeah.
Awesome. I never got any tattoos, and now I think if I did it now, it would be like, there goes the midlife crisis again.
You should do it.
First he grew his hair. Now he's,
you should do it. I think you should do it. I think you should always wait until your 40s to get tattoos. I did not. I got my tattoos when I was in my early 20s, and I regret them all. Maybe I'll start again. Maybe I'll get these ones covered up, and then when I turn like 45, I'll get some appropriately middle-aged tattoos.
There is a logic to waiting, right? I mean, you know yourself better.
For sure.
You're not going to like, if you got. I was like trying to explain to my kids, 5 years ago, if you got the tattoo of the thing you really liked, it would be like Bob the Builder. That'd be pretty lame today, right?
Right. Yeah. Or now it's like you get things that become problematic. Like, you know, when I was in the 90s, everyone was getting like tribal tattoos or like, you know, Japanese symbols or like Mandarin language. And it turns out that that's all highly problematic. Like a lot of people have Harry Potter tattoos, and now that's problematic. So they, you know, so now you like loved Harry Potter when you were in your teens and 20s, and then you get this tattoo, and now all of a sudden you think J.K. Rowling is you know, the head dragon of the transphobic KKK. What are you going to do with that? You know, covering them up is difficult.
Well, at some point, paying homage to something became cultural appropriation. Yeah. But I do think those people, I think they were trying to, in some ways, like buy indulgences or like signal that it was virtue signaling. Ironically, the cultural, they were. I mean, like, I think cultural appropriation is largely a force for good. Mm-hmm. But I do think there were like white liberals who were doing it to basically, you know, steal the coolness of being not just a straight white person.
Right. I mean, it's probably not even conscious. It's just you're doing what your friends are doing, and your friends are getting these dumb tattoos, and now you're
I know you had cornrows. I'm aware of this.
I had terrible dreadlocks. I did not have cornrows.
I'm sorry.
Horrific dreadlocks. I don't know if they actually even count as dreadlocks. But in my defense, I was 15, and the term cultural appropriation had not yet been introduced into the lexicon.
Well, you have to be careful, and even someone like Tom Hanks, who is the Jimmy Stewart of my generation, Uncle Kip from Family Ties, Tom Hanks, Forrest Gump, wrote a piece. I think it was in the New York Times, where he talked about how, you know, it's crazy that we didn't hear about this Tulsa race massacre sooner, and he was criticized for writing that piece. And someone said, I think it was at NPR, maybe someone wrote, it's great that he's saying this, but it's not enough for him to not be a racist. He really needs to be anti-racist.
Right.
So what's that about?
Yeah. This is Eric Deggans at NPR. He's a pop culture critic at NPR, which has become so unbearably woke that I cannot stop listening to it. But every time I listen to it, it makes my blood pressure rise. So Tom Hanks, right. He wrote this column in the New York Times that was about how history is not adequately taught in American schools. And I think everyone could probably agree with that. Yes, the Tulsa Massacre should be taught in schools. You know, even more recent history, I didn't learn about My Lai until I was in college. You know, there are people who were, you know, like of my father's generation would have known about it because they were alive at the time. But there are like large part, or like the move bombing in Philadelphia when you know, a bomb was dropped on homes and children were killed and houses were demolished in Philadelphia in the 1970s, in a racist action by the FBI and by local authorities. These things should be taught for sure. Yeah. But what Eric Deggans' argument is that, I mean, it's all in the headline. It's not enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist. And anti-racism is this ideology that, you know, it's not particularly new. I started hearing about it probably in the last 10 years. I don't know when the term itself was coined. But it's about, anti-racism is about looking at applying the lens of racism through every action. So probably the most famous proponent of anti-racism is Ibram X. Kendi, formerly known as Henry Rogers. And his whole thing, he wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And his whole idea is that every government policy is either racist or anti-racist. Everyone. So if it's like where you place a stop sign, that's got to be racist or anti-racist. And he pitched this idea of having essentially a department of anti-racism in the federal government that would analyze every public policy for racism or anti-racism. He's an interesting guy. I think he's kind of nuts. I was recently in a bookstore and I saw a workbook that he created. So he's made this whole series of books about anti-racism. There's like Anti-Racism for Children. This was a workbook. So it was mostly blank pages, which is a brilliant way to, you know, you don't even have to come up with the content. Yeah. You just
Can I interest you in the Too Dumb to Fail for children?
Yeah, totally. And then but there were some prompts. And so I turned to this page, the first page I turned to, I had 4 boxes. And one box was like, write down something that you don't like about Middle Easterners, write down something you don't like about Black people, like write down something you don't like about Latinxes. So my thought was like, okay, write this down and then rip it out of the book and then burn it because you do not want anybody to find this.
Yes.
It was just a very bizarre concept because I also don't think most people think about, like most people who are going to buy a book like that are probably not the sorts of people who look at a group of Latino people and say, you all play your music too loud and put your cars on blocks in the driveway. You probably not. If you're buying the anti-racism book, you are probably not actually like consciously racist, or you wouldn't be buying the book. Anyway, so this guy has managed to make tons of money. Jack Dorsey gave him $10 million for his Anti-Racism Institute. He's incredibly successful, but this is his sort of thing is there's non-racist, which I consider myself a proud non-racist. And then there is anti-racism, which is a whole different can of worms.
I mean, there are a lot of problems with this, but here's one. I'm willing to concede that race is one big topic in our history. And then that I even think that there is like systemic racism and it's a big part of our story, but it's not the only story, right? I mean, there's sex. There's love, there's money, the haves and the have-nots. There's honor and integrity. There are a lot of dramas and a lot of dynamics at work. And like race may be one of the top 10, and it may be big, even bigger than that. But like not every single thing that happens is about race or even has, racial undertones.
I mean, I agree with you, but that is not the anti-racist position to take. And my problem with this ideology is that it's simplistic. It attributes so if there's a discrepancy in anything, in test scores between Black students and Asian students or white students or whatever, then the only answer can be racism. If there's a discrepancy in income or in smoking rates, the only answer is racism. And I just think that's too simplistic and it doesn't take human behavior into account. It really flattens everything.
I mean, this will sound like such a conservative hackneyed line, but it really feels like reverse racism. Like this is about power, but it's about just flipping the dynamic on its head.
Right.
And, basically paybacks for all the years that the Blue-Eyed Devil was running the show.
Did you hear about what happened at Seattle Pride recently?
I think I saw you tweet about it.
Okay, so Seattle Pride, there's an event that was planned. It was called Taking Black Seattle, or no, Taking Black Pride, or Take Black Pride, something like that. And the idea, so this was going to be in a city park, an event affiliated with the bigger Seattle Pride. That's a city organization, city project. It was affiliated with that, going to be in a park, Jimi Hendrix Park in Seattle. And the event was posed as, so it was free for Black and brown people. They didn't defend or define who fits into that category. And then for white people, there was you had to pay a reparations fee between $10 and $50 sliding scale. And another Pride event, so Capitol Hill Pride, which is the historically gay neighborhood in Seattle. There's also a Capitol Hill Pride. And the organizers of Capitol Hill Pride objected to this because they saw it as racist. And they complained about it to the city Human Rights Commission and to the president of the Seattle City Council, Lorena Gonzalez, who is running for mayor. She's probably the front runner in the mayoral race. And Lorena Gonzalez was so offended by these people complaining about having to pay a reparations fee that she dropped out of the Capitol Hill Pride event. This is almost certainly illegal because this was going to be on city property. This was a city-sponsored event. You cannot charge people different rates based on your race. That is a clear violation of the law. But the Human Rights Commission and the city councilwoman and other people on the city council all defended this idea that white people should have to pay a reparations fee to attend this event. So I wrote to the ACLU and I asked them their stance on this, and surprise, surprise, they did not get back to me.
Yes. You know what's funny about this? I'm pretty sure that there used to be conservative groups on college campuses that would do this exact thing.
Yes. This happened at University of Washington. They had this conservative group had a reparations bake sale, and people freaked out about it. And this is the same thing. I was surprised that people freaked out about the reparations bake sale, because to me, I thought, like, isn't this what you want? Like, don't you want white people to pay more money than black people? What are you complaining about? They're doing exactly what you want them to do. It's just they're like doing it in order to make fun of you.
So like, this is really like literally something that conservative groups used to do to illustrate the absurdity. And now it's literally happening.
Yes. Yes.
And now, is there a cleavage between the gay community and the
oh, of course,
and the African American or whatever we'll call this
queer black BLM? Yeah.
Okay.
So the word community doesn't even really apply to LGBTQ, the community, the same way it doesn't apply to white people or black people or whatever. There's no community. There are populations. But there's lots of infighting and drama, and there always has been. None of this is new. But certainly this, the radical queer, the radical queer side versus the assimilationist, the BLM side. Yes, there's lots of drama and infighting, and none of that is particularly new. But
so, like, a lot of what you're talking about, what we're talking about, like in the last 5 or 10 minutes, gets called critical race theory. And if that's what critical race theory is, I'm obviously against it. But I hear other people saying, well, no, critical race theory just means we get to talk about these things. Like, is there a definition of what CRT?
I mean, okay, so this is complicated, but CRT is a legal framework that was developed in the 1970s by a guy named Derek Bell. It is an academic concept. It has been redefined, particularly by people like Chris Rufo, to mean everything that is anti-racism, that is Black Lives Matter, that is the horrible diversity trainings where a corporation will separate people into white affinity groups and black affinity groups. So all of that has been redefined as CRT. So I think this is a strategic problem, because when the proponents of CRT say, you're not talking about CRT, they're correct. CRT is a specific thing. But when they say, like, critical race theory isn't being taught in schools, things like that. Well, no, it is. It's not like teachers aren't teaching Derek Bell in elementary schools. What they're doing is framing everything through the eyes of race, through the lens of race. So it's very complicated.
So if I'm opposed to framing everything through this, like, really racializing every interaction, should I not call that critical race theory when I'm criticizing critical race? Should I call it? Is there a word for this?
I mean, it is racism? Critical race. It is critical race theory, but that's the problem, is that the word means different things depending on who you ask. I mean, the same thing can be said of fake news, of cancel culture. We just don't woke, the term woke. We're using these terms interchangeably that mean different things to different people. So there's. And plus, critical race theory is incredibly complicated, and most people, including myself, who talk about it, don't understand it. Yeah. So, it's just, this is such a mess. I'm so sick of hearing about CRT. It is a bizarre thing that this has entered the cultural lexicon, and you have thousands of people who don't know what they're talking about, fighting about it on Twitter and on TV and on the internet.
Indeed. All right. Well, I know you got a hop. I know. So we kept it short and sweet, but let me just recommend everyone follow you on Twitter at Kitty Herzog and support your podcast. It's patreon.com/blocked and reported. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Katie Herzog, thank you for coming back on the news.
Thanks for having me, Matt.